It's my honor and an absolute pleasure to introduce our inaugural speakers, Ms. Shabana Azmi, who is our guest of honor, and Mr. Saurav Srivastava, who will be in conversation with her. Ms. Azmi, a Padma Bhushan awardee, who has won 5 national and 5 Filmfare Award, is a household name in India and really needs no introduction. But I do want to introduce her other significant avatars, very relevant for our discussion in this conference. An icon, a feminist, an intellectual far ahead of her time, a tireless social worker who had the vision to create equality when it was a pipe dream for many. She was nominated to the Rajya Sabha and has been recognized globally with a slew of awards. Gandhi International Peace Prize, Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and Chavez Award, just to name a few. She has also received the Crystal Award along with Muhammad Ali and Michael Douglas at the World Economic Forum and has been honored along with Mother Teresa by President Mitterrand of France. I could go on and on, but you can read the details about all her achievements on our platform here. Shabana ji is a role model, not only in the movie industry, but for the rest of us striving towards creating a gender equitable world, what we call an Equiverse. We at Talentnomics India are both honored and delighted to have her with us today. A very, very warm welcome to you, Ms. Azmi. We are equally delighted that Mr. Saurav Srivastava, a Padma Shri awardee, will be in conversation with her. He has founded and chaired many institutions of the New India like NASSCOM, TIE, India Venture Capital Association, Indian Angel Network, and many others. He also sits on boards of many government and bodies and committees and has won several lifetime awards for his contribution to IT, entrepreneurship, and venture capital. He has invested in over 100 startups, including in the film world. We are really fortunate to have him on our advisory board, and I consider myself especially blessed that he is also my mentor and my guru. Saurav, may I invite you please to take this conversation forward with Shabana ji, help us understand how single-handedly she has strived to build an Equiverse, a universe where equity is the norm. Over to you, Saurav.
Thank you, Shita. Well, Shabana ji, let me start by first sharing that I'm an unabashed fan of yours.
Oh.
Of course, for your unique contribution to Indian cinema, but much more so for really how you have lived your life with grace, dignity, and humility, despite your millions of awards and accolades and laurels. And you have used your position to help other women cross the gender divide. So thank you really so much for being with us today and helping us build our dream to build an Equiverse, as Ipshita talked about. I should tell you, I've been associated with Talentnomics from its inception and feel that their mission of empowering and encouraging women to be leaders across various disciplines and also be role models and inspire others is a very powerful way to really build a more equitable world. I've personally been associated with hundreds, if not thousands, of men and women leaders throughout my business life, and even in the 100+ startups that I've invested. And I can tell you with absolute conviction that to build a more sustainable world, we have to make sure that we give women equal space in all the spheres. And I don't want to add that I practice what I preach. Most, if not all, the institutions or organizations that I've helped found are led by women. And they're all the better for it. So you are indeed the perfect person for us to have this conversation with today. And let me start with something interesting. You have said that you grew up in a household which was, one might say, feminist, where men and women were equal. And it was only around 19 that you realized that the gender equality is not something that's normal outside of in the world. And since then, of course, you become a role model for helping other women get gender equality. So I wanted to ask you, what made you focus on this area?
You see, Saurabh, actually coming from the family that I did, my father was a very well-known poet called Kefi Azmi, who was a member of the Communist Party. My mother, Shaukat Kefi, was a very highly respected stage actress. And both of them believed that art should be used as an instrument for social change. The fact is that till the age of 9, I was living in a commune of the Communist Party, in which we had a room which was, I think, that measuring between 180 square feet to 220 square feet. And we were 8 families living together, sharing just one toilet and one bathroom. But I never sensed a feeling of deprivation at all, because the people that we were living with, Sardar Jafri, for instance, and very many people of his caliber, just brought a sense of equality in everything that they did, particularly when it comes to treating and behaving with women. My father wrote a poem called Aurat in the early 40s, in which he said, "Ut meri jaan mere saath hi chalna hai tujhe." You have to march shoulder to shoulder with me. At a time when it was believed that it was the man who would go out and struggle in the world and the woman would stay at home and look after the heart and the. At that point, this was a dictum he believed in. And I saw that all around me. And so that's why, innocently, I believe that's the way of the world. But it's when I went out of college that I realized that this isn't true. Something that I take for granted is an exception rather than the rule. Even so, I must say it wasn't something which became a great concern to me. I went on to win the gold medal at the Film Institute for Best Student in Acting. And I was fortunate enough to start working almost immediately after I finished my graduation at the Film Institute. So everything was fine and hunky-dory for me as far as my personal view was concerned. And it was really much later that I went for a women in cinema seminar at the Alliance Francaise. And it was pointed out to me that some of the dialogue in the film was really endorsing a patriarchal structure and was almost violent in what it was saying in terms of women being in second position. For instance, one of the dialogue, because it's a husband and wife that separate, Rajesh Khanna and I, and Khanna comes up to me and says, "Na ye yaad rakho Neema, कि औरत के ससुराल का दुख भी मायके के सुख से बेहतर होता है." And this was something that I had not even paid attention to. And it was when these feminist women started attacking me that I revisited the film. Before that, I was perfectly confident. I said, how rarely does it happen that Rajesh Khanna is this big superstar and I have an equal part. In mainstream cinema, it was not very common to see women playing central parts. And that's when I realized. And after that, I started revisiting everything that I'd done. And I realized that I was living in a cocoon of sorts. And then one thing led to another. And then I realized that this was something that I had to take up in earnest, because never mind how successful the woman, even in Hindi cinema, there was a glass ceiling of patriarchy that she hadn't confronted and even sort of focused on. And that's when I realized that the invisibility of patriarchy working not only on men but also women, because women have internalized. Society has internalized patriarchy, and that it needed to be brought. What was taken completely for granted had to be challenged, and one had to say, this is unfair and this cannot be accepted. So equality, what actually equality means is, I think, really through my movies and the seminars I was attending and stuff like that, that I started understanding. And for me, it was very clear that it's the concept of equality is quite warped. Equality doesn't mean that the women put themselves in the men's shoes, which happened very often. And the understanding of that is that women are different but equal. They are not separate but equal. They are not the same. And so when we were asking for our place in the sun, whether it was on environment or the arts or politics or whatever, we had a point of view which was different from that of the male, and that difference needed to be celebrated and not become a reason for imitating the male behavior. Only then I figured that the world would be a better place. And that's how I got involved with the women's movement.
So that looks like you got involved quite early, and you make a good point. Imitating male behavior is in any case a bad idea. It's not. Male behavior is not something that I think is great.
In the first place.
Yeah, in the first place. So that's always a bad idea. So let me ask you something else. You know, you won a national award, and a very rare and very superlative praise from Satyajit Ray for what you did. And that was for your first film, Ankur. And actually, you launched the whole parallel cinema movement in India. And since then, you won a plethora, really, of awards, laurels. I mean, I was just reading about you, and the mind just boggled to look at all that you had done. So tell me, despite all these achievements and all the recognition, have there still been instances when you felt your gender become a challenge in what you do or what you're doing?
You know, strangely, I didn't face much gender bias in the film industry because of the kind of roles I think I was doing, and also because I was Kathy Azmi's daughter. So I had a platform. I was lucky to have a platform like that. And I don't say that I am responsible for breaking that. So, sorry, I just got distracted for a minute. And so in actual terms, if you tell me on a day-to-day living, whether I experienced it, I would say no, I was fortunate to have missed it. What strangely happened in the early 90s, I was a member of the jury at the Montreal International Film Festival. All the others were males. I was the only female in that board of 11 people. Now, what happened is they decided that they would make me the president of the jury. I think that was their way of compensating the male ego and not putting one up against the other and saying, all right. And the members of the jury behaved in, I thought, a rather strange way, because they were saying queen and beauty and we are your slaves, and, almost a fictitious kind of thing, which I found on an international platform very strange.
Yeah.
Now, when we did the first meeting, I was very clear in what I was saying. So I spelled out what I thought was the way we should continue with it. And I could see the absolute shock and horror on the face of my colleagues, who felt, arey, ye third world country, and that also just an actress, she is going to tell us
What to do?
And it was, I mean, I could palpably feel their prejudice just coming out. Me being third world and an actress also being part of the fact that I was also a woman. And that came as a very big shock to me. But I held my own and I worked my way through it. And I said that if there was a man here, nobody would behave in this
Right.
way. Yeah, that's how deep rooted it is.
You're right. It is. It is indeed. And there are so many subtle ways that people send those signals by what they say and what they don't say, and that sort of behavior. So let me ask you one more thing. You know, you've spent your life working for women, standing up for them. And I would tell you that I'm always counseling women in most of the organizations that I'm involved with to say, look, don't just stop at leaning in. That's not good enough. So what would you think is what women feel? What would you think are the biggest roadblocks for women to empower themselves and negotiate for what they want? Is it more mental? Of course, there are social, but eventually women have to also push. And how do we, because as you said, it's so socialized. I mean, right in the beginning, you didn't even realize that something was so obviously derogatory to women, but you become aware. What can one do? I mean, I'm always advising women to do this. What do you think?
You know, the stranglehold of patriarchy is something women must confront, because it comes in ways visible and invisible, because of which their view of themselves gets decided by society rather than how it should be. This is how it is accepted as the norm rather than say, this is how it should be. Because really, I do believe that until men and women are treated as equals and have the opportunity to rise to the level of their own potential, society cannot become a better place, a more just place. You can't have only one point of view. Now, for me, being as I was in cinema, and in the arts, I felt that, in cinema, the male gaze was dominating the stories, the way films were made, the characters that were given to women. She was always playing the stereotypical suffering wife, the all forgiving mother, the loving sister, and none of the attributes or assets that should be given to her as a whole being ever came her way. Now, I was very fortunate that I got roles one after the other, that there were enough number of directors and writers who had faith in my ability. And so I was luckier than most. But for women to negotiate more space for themselves, whether they are in the arts or anything else, you have to be strategic. You have to be strategic. So there have to be women who hold hands with each other, because it becomes very difficult for a woman to break the glass ceiling.
Yes.
So to form bonds with other women's groups, I think to me has been a very important thing. Also, I think to read up on patriarchy, because I saw myself changing and getting much more informed, much more informed. It's very important that you do that. But from that must come the understanding that men and women are equal, not better nor worse, but different. And that difference needs to be celebrated. So I think what is extremely important that women in leadership positions must mentor younger women reach that place. That is very important. I think networking is another thing that is very important, because we see that men naturally gravitate towards networking, but women barely do it. So there are all these strategies that need to be used, but ultimately you have to understand what equality means. Therein lies the problem, because a lot of times, like I said earlier also, equality means wearing the pants in the family, and that's not going to improve things at all. And there is also a legislation कि ये करो तो ये equality है, वो करो तो वो equality है. What has to grow out of that, and that can be done with women getting together and talking to each other and discussing. But for instance, I find it so shocking, like it was a very big organization, I wouldn't like to take the name, but it was only about 12 years ago that this American woman said that flexi hours for women were completely unacceptable. Women, if they came into higher positions, they had to be twice as tough to reach half that position. So if she said she had a dentist appointment for her 10-year-old son in the middle of the day, and she couldn't ask for leave. So what she would do is she would bring an extra bag, have an extra coat, put that on her desk and disappear. And people would just believe that she's somewhere in the office. And then she would take her son to the dentist and come back. Now, today, I find such an example horrifying. But the fact that this is something that we took for granted, that this is how we need to go further. This mindset has to change, but the fact is that we have to prove ourselves to be. It's not because we are women, we should be given except that things like maternity leave, the fact that in our society, I really wish that in the male-female gender balance, that men would really contribute to the housework and the raising of the child. I mean, it's very fancy to say, but we have so many staff members, we don't have to worry about that. But the fact is that a woman, if her child has 103 temperature and she's in a very big position, who's going to leave her job for that day? Is it going to be sometimes the husband and sometimes the wife? Or is it always going to be the wife? So under the guise of accepting that your work is less important than mine, you're actually forcing into a kind of role playing. My God, if you leave your sick child and go away to work, what an ambitious woman you are. You don't care for your child. Why? The husband is all right. The father of the child has more important work. I remember reading a novel by Liv Ullmann, who's a very famous Norwegian film actress who I admire a lot. She was Ingmar Bergman's big muse. And she says in a book, Changing, that, you know, when I was writing this book, I could sense in my child's nanny the disapproval written large on her face because I was typing away instead of spending that time with my 8-year-old daughter. But if the father came in, she would walk on tiptoes and see the father's come. He shouldn't be disturbed. Now, if somebody in Liv Ullmann's position can feel that, And that also in a part of society where we think Sweden and Norway and all that are much more equality conscious. That's how it seeps in.
No, it's very true. It's there's so many more examples of this, and some very, very prominent women have spoken about it. Indra Nui has talked about it. The chief
Yes.
head of PepsiCo, and all her mother would tell her, "Look, get the dinner ready quickly. You're late," or stuff like that. And I just mentioned one thing why I think maybe it's not difficult for me to understand is all this is a women issue, but all of us who went to the US and made our careers there faced this. When we wanted to be entrepreneurs or do things, we faced this not because we were Indian. And so the venture capitalists wouldn't put money in our companies. It would be very hard to break the ceiling, go above vice president. So we didn't have the days when all the tech companies in the world are headed by Indians. That was not true in the 70s and 80s. And it took all of us to get together and create an organization called TIE. And you know that you visited us in Silicon Valley. In fact, I remember a very pleasant evening where you even showed us that you can sing almost as well as you can act.
Oh.
But we got together, we helped each other. And guess what? That simple movement called TIE resulted in the fact that a third of all startups in India, in the Valley today, Silicon Valley, actually have an Indian founder.
Yes. Yes.
Because now it's accepted. Now Indian CEOs are the norm. But it wasn't like that just 2-3 decades ago. So I see some similarity in that whole situation. When you talk about women coming together and doing some of it, it took us just that to come together. Nobody else was going to do it for us. So,
coming together, forming organizations in which you can come together, for me is very strengthening and very important, because in numbers there is strength.
and in fact,
If you have somebody who's breaking the rules and wants to go ahead, it's very comforting to have people who will go along with
Yes.
you. Guys, what you're saying, that's what leaders are about, right?
Yeah.
Not maintaining the status quo, but going beyond.
That's what I meant, that I really counsel people, forget about leaning in. Those days are gone. You just need to be much firmer. And in fact, Ipshita would tell you, we were colleagues in my first startup on IT services, and most of our work was overseas. But we had a rule that if somebody had to go abroad to execute a project, we would allow leeway for women to say no if they had family issues and whatever, but we had no exceptions for men. So we had almost reverse rules. Let me actually move to another area. You mentioned that you grew up with a simple childhood, and thanks to your parents, money was never an issue. But now you have your personal wealth and success. And I'd like to ask you, how has it impacted your thinking, your life, the decisions you take? And do you think, we do want all women to be independent, but do you think financial independence is just as important?
I think financial independence is very, very important, Saurabh. But I would like to define what this financial independence is, because independence can't come if you are earning your own money, but you don't have the decision-making power about how you will spend it. That is the most important thing. And so if you see, if you see a bank clerk, for instance, she works from morning to night. She in the morning will cook the food for the family. She will put the clothes, soak the clothes. She will then just go to the bank. She will come back and then she will recook in the night and she will take out those clothes and put them out to dry. But when it comes to getting her salary, does she have the power to use it the way she wants, to spend it on a sari or to buy even magazines? Do you know that in India, it has been discovered that even which magazines will come into the house is decided by the male of the family. So if after doing this, the mother-in-law or the husband is going to decide how she's going to spend that money, then that is not financial independence. So it has to move beyond that to make it absolutely clear that you earn the money and you will spend it in the way you want.
True, very true, very true. I think that's really important. So let me actually take you to another place. You know, Shabana, to achieve the social goals you have always wanted, you have always been very free and very outspoken. Firstly, I had one question saying, has this created too many problems in your life, in your film career, for example? And what would you say to women about speaking their mind? Because generally, they tend to shy away from doing so.
I think you have to be strategic and you cannot make everything into a war. You give it battles and then focus on the war. And what is clearly non-negotiable is something that you need to work out. But to just be totally brave and to not have any strategy in place and say, no, I'm the kind of person who just speaks my mind and to hell with what happens to me. That's not clever. That's not intelligent. Because if you're just going to be an iconoclast, not going to serve the purpose. People might say, kya baat hai, but will you really achieve what you want to achieve? So you have to be strategic. You have to realize that this is something. Except that's why I said non-negotiables are extremely important. Because if you feel, no, this under any circumstance, I'm not going to tolerate, then of course you go and stick your neck out. I think that's very important.
That's very good advice. Pick your battles.
Pick your battles. Absolutely pick your
Decide your non-negotiables, and that might be different for different people.
That's right. Yes. There is no fixed non-negotiable. It's for every relationship and what they understand in that. Definitely.
Also, because most of them are not in your position where you can actually.
That's right. Yeah.
To get away with. And my other question, have you had a lot of problems with being so free and spoken, or people have just come to accept that, look, we got to take it from her?
No. Obviously, it has caused a lot of discomfort in my work, a lot of criticism even from my colleagues. But on the other hand, there's been a lot of admiration and a lot of respect. So you have to work that out and say what is more important for you. Yeah. Because I remember, and oftentimes I think we mistake what people's reactions are going to be. I remind you of an instance when the Shahi Imam and I were in a television program of Barkhadat. At the time, the Shahi Imam, Bukhari, was saying that jihad karna bahut zaruri hai aur apne religion ke liye utna bahut zaruri hai. So I said, so I have a suggestion. Aap aisa kyun nahi karte कि we asked the Prime Minister for Kandahar that he wanted us to do jihad in Kandahar. So मैंने कहा हम ऐसा करते हैं कि we'll ask the Prime Minister to airdrop you to Kandahar, and then why don't you wage that jihad? It will solve your problem and my problem. And he was frothing at the mouth and he said, मैं नाचने गाने वालों की बात नहीं. सुनता
I
नाच
remember
नाचने गाने वाली की बात नहीं सुनता. Anyway, then the program went, etc., etc. अब उसके बाद ये हुआ that all my friends, and I was living alone in Delhi because I was a member of parliament, and then all my friends said, you know, you need to spruce up your security, and this is going to get you into a lot of trouble, and you know, there'll be undas after you, this, that, and sort of. You know, the letters criticizing me were this many, and the number of letters that were appreciative of me from the community were like this high. So what I am saying is, in those moments, sometimes just needs a leader to say what they themselves are feeling. You see, so that, obviously that is not something that you can plan. I mean, that just happens from within, and you developing confidence within yourself. If that cannot be a strategy, that has to be something that comes from you, from being emotionally strong. So becoming emotionally strong is, I think, very, very important.
I think there are 2 points you make, which are very good. Emotionally strong, pick your battles. And, you know, people like you who are in a leadership position can, of course, go much further. But in some ways, you need to kind of make way for the others to follow. But for most women, they should be careful about picking their battles, deciding their non-negotiables. And that's a very good suggestion on taking this forward. But just related to this, since you mentioned that, you know, considering your public persona, the constant media attention you always do get, you would have faced a lot of often comments, criticisms. Some of them might be harsh. And, you know, women often shy away from standing up, you know, for themselves or their views because they fear rejection. How did you manage both, you know, to keep yourself motivated and just make sure your mental well-being stayed intact with all of this barrage?
A lot of support from my family, a lot of support from my husband, a lot of support from my brother and my father. That really gave me a lot of strength.
In fact, you mentioned that your father and your husband are similar in their views and are very empowering figures for women. Well, let me ask you, how have you and Javed Bhai built an Equiverse for yourselves, for your family, for your friends?
You know, we come from the same kind of family background. His father was a member of the Communist Party. He was a progressive Urdu poet. He was a film lyricist. His mother was a writer. In fact, people say that we are so similar, backgrounds are so similar that we should have had an arranged marriage rather than a love marriage. So what has happened is that our worldview is the same. Our worldview is the same, and that's what I think keeps us going. And the fact is that we are each other's best friends. I think that in a marriage is very, very important because we are friends and we do not bog down our relationship in role playing. So if you would ask me, I am not the typical wife. Javed is not the typical husband. So it can't be that I will be the typical wife, but you will not be. Both of us have to decide that for each other. And because our vision of the world is the same, then all the disagreements, all the fighting, all that happens, all that was swallowed up because the vision is the same. And also because Javed is a feminist, just like my father. You know, so on this personal front, I have not had to wage the battle that a lot of women will do. In fact, very interestingly, in the beginning, when I would constantly worry about what is Javed going to eat, what is going to be cooked for him, etc., he would say, but why are you doing this? You're at work. we have enough staff members. They will be able to do this. Why are you wasting your time? I said, no, I don't think it's a wastage of time. It is that I want to be good at everything that I do. And I said, and then he said, this constant desire to be a superwoman is really going to bog you down. So again, you have to decide where is the priority and what it is. And if some things need to go, let them go. Let them not be perfect. Don't try to be that superwoman, because then you're going to get really bogged down by that rather than play by instinct and be natural.
So I'll tell you this, I think everyone who's going to watch this interview will really wish that they had a husband like Javed.
That
Yeah.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Yes.
I want to talk to you about Mizwan, but before that, let me ask you a couple of things. One, you were at a time when gender roles in India were defined in society and certainly defined very clearly in the film world. How did you negotiate and get all these roles which were unconventional, showing women in unconventional roles? I mean, was that particularly difficult for you to do? In fact, you mentioned that when you did Earth, a lot of women approached you and wanted their marital problem solved. So just share with us a little bit about how you ended up doing all these roles, how you got them.
I was really lucky to be at the right place at the right time, because I started with parallel cinema with Ankur, which became a sort of cult film. And after that, I'm very fortunate that there were directors like Shyam Benegal, who were giving me roles that you would normally not see in mainstream cinema. But to recount what happened in Earth was that I did a film called Earth with Mahesh Bhatt. It's a simple story about a wife who's deserted by her husband for an actress, and then realizes he cannot get on with her and comes back to his wife and says that, forgive me. And very simply, she says, if I had done the same thing, would you have accepted me? And he's honest enough to say no. So she walks out. Now, at that time, this was early 80s. The distributor said it's a very powerful film, it's very good, but there is no way the audience is going to accept an Indian husband saying sorry to his wife and his wife walking out on him. Change the end and we'll be all the way with the film. But fortunately, Mahesh Bhatt and I just sort of dug our heels in and said, this is the film with this ending, otherwise there's no film at all. Now, when the film was released, it became this huge super hit. And I had hordes of women walk into my home, not as fans to star, but in sisterhood, expecting me to resolve all their marital problems. And I was a young woman at that time. And I was very, very disturbed and very frightened by that, because I had just done a part, a character. And then I realized that, in the public's view, very often the character and the actor become one person. And then I realized this is a very strong instrument I have in my hand, and that it would be a pity to waste it and to not use it outside my work in films. And that's how I got involved with the women's movement.
That's a very good story. But you also sell yourself short a little bit, saying you just did those roles because you chose to do them. Not every woman in Bollywood would have actually taken.
I would attribute that to my training at the Film Institute, because I was exposed to international cinema, European cinema, Japanese cinema, which I would not have done had I been in Bombay. And so that shaped my aesthetics. And I remembered when I was given Ankur, I was offered Ankur. A lot of people said that this might not be a very clever decision, because imagine she's an adulteress. You will immediately be made into a vamp. You will get only villains roles. Then somebody said to me, imagine she steals rice. What a horrible woman she is. And to me, I felt that the fact that she steals rice is such a human thing, because she's so poor. And the difference between her and her lord and master is so huge. And they're working on their land, right? And if she just takes a handful of rice, I thought it was very human. And it was something that you see on screen. And they said she needs to be much older. Actually, Sham had thought of Lakshmi as somebody much older. But I just went with my instinct, and I felt that this is something that I would like to do. And I think that I attribute to the fact that I had been exposed to international cinema.
So, a related question, small, minor one. There's always been a pay gap between gender across many industries, also in the film industry. And I suspect that must have been true when you were acting in these movies, right? Did you ever think of negotiating for it, or has that now changed? Has it gotten better?
No, it has gotten better, but this is something that I have not been very troubled about, because I'm a realist. And I realize that the producer is there as a businessman. Okay, the producer is there because he wants to make the maximum money on the product that he has created. Now, how much money the producer will get from the distributor depends on the male star. Simple. So if you have a big male star, then never mind whoever comes in, there'll be just a difference of a few monies. But if women are playing the central role, then most of the men are not even interested. Both big stars are not interested in playing that part. So what we have to fight for is not just pay parity, which is of course what is desirable, but then you work around the ecosystem, which means that women definitely, when they are playing the protagonist, yes, they compromise on their money, but hopefully they will do such a good job of it. And it's a question of just a couple of women-led films to become commercially successful, and then it will happen. It will happen. So what we need to change is to get more women, more stars to work in films, perhaps at lower prices. Now, either you can say that, no, I will only work at that price, or you can create an ecosystem where maybe not for you personally, but 5 years along the line, you could make a contribution.
You're quite right. Like it's happening for women's tennis, because it was getting there in its own way. So let me actually ask you about Ms. One. This is a charity that you had. This is a charity that really talks about empowering, educating, looking after the girl child in rural areas. And it's now globally known. So just share with us a little bit about Ms. One and
Mijwan
stories from there.
In Uttar Pradesh, Eastern UP, was a little village in which my father, Kafi Azmi, was born. And of course, he left it. He was a zamindar. They were zamindars, but my father fled from the flock and became a communist member. And so he then, when partition happened, the family went to Pakistan. And so there was really very distant relatives who were there in their home. Now, 40 years later, my father, having had a paralytic stroke, which rendered his left hand and left leg incapacitated for life because of a brain hemorrhage, started saying Mijwa, 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 Mijwa with so much passion that my mother took him to Mijwa, and he found that it was a village frozen in time. There was no development over there. It was such a small village that it didn't even have a pin code. My father had to be taken on a palki to his house. And that's when he decided that the rest of his life he was going to devote to this land of his birth. And he set up the Mijwa Welfare Society because he believed that if India is to make real progress, then we have to look towards our villages where more than 70 to 80% of the population lives and focus on that. So you do that with a focus on the girl child and women. So he started with, he built a road, then he built a school, then it's an inter-college. Then after that, there is a embroidery center where Manish Malhotra, the Bollywood designer, gets all his craft done from villagers. There's there's sports, there's every activity that you can imagine, computer center, etc. So for a girl in Mijwa, for having nothing, today can start having a seamless movement from studying to getting technical education, to getting employment, and to also exercising her sports skills. So it's really a total development of personality. When my father passed away in 2002, obviously it fell on me because I used to visit him in Mijwa a lot. And I used to see how totally dedicated he was to it and how single-handedly he had brought so much change to the village. And so then I took on the Mijwa Welfare Society, helped by Namrata Goel. So there has been a huge transition in the attitudes of women there. And you know, sort of you can say that, all right, we made so many buildings, we did all that, we created so much infrastructure. But for me, the true achievement is a change in mindset, which is what is happening. Because the women in Mijwa that are now earning their own money and earning enough money so that they can spend it the way they want and also support the education of their nieces and nephews and several things like that. Now, what has happened, it has changed the family, the status quo in the family structure. Because from being looked upon as liabilities, they're now being looked upon as assets. That is adding to their confidence. Then what we do is every year we have a fashion show in which the film industry has been really, really kind to me. So from Amitabh Bachchan to Shah Rukh Khan to Priyanka Chopra to name it, Deepika Padukone and all that, all of them, Ranveer Singh, they've all worked for Mijwa. So when we bring these crafts people to Mijwa, to Mumbai, and this, I can see the excitement from them because they say, "Arey, Shah Rukh Khan jo sherwani pehne hai, wo to maine banai hai," and that leads to a great sense of empowerment and changes their attitude in the village. And so now the village is a village which the most important thing for me is that, you know, child marriage used to be a huge curse in that village. And both Abba and I tried very hard, but they used to say, you know, thousands of years of practice and you can't change it and this, that, and the other. And then anyway, we started creating, because my mother used to participate in the dramatics of the school and she got them to write a play, and they went to Jaipur, which was the first time they had moved out of the village. And it was a play against dowry, and they won the first prize. Now this girl came back to the school. She asked for an assembly session. She took this award and she said, "This is not just an award for me, it is my passport for freedom. Because on the basis of this award, I'm going to tell my parents, I have desires and I want to fulfill them. I have proved to you that I have the ability. I will not get married before the age of 18." She then made the teachers and the students all take a vow that if they would find a single instance of a girl being forced into marriage before the age of 18, they would come and do a whole dharna outside. They would do a demonstration and they would report the parents to the police. Now, that's a groundbreaking thing to do. And
Indeed.
so, consequently, in and around like 40 villages of Mijwa, there is no child marriage that happens. And this came from the girl herself. Now, to me, that change in mindset is
Yeah.
the big.
Yeah. I mean, this is fantastic. I mean, being able to do this must make you so very happy.
And with no money, with very, very little money. We don't get any government funding. We don't get huge corporate funding, none of that. But we do it because we have a very, very dedicated, loyal team.
So I'll tell you this, Shabana, as we're coming to the end of the interview. I am so happy that you agreed to do this for us, because this session is going to be so inspirational for so many women who hear it and watch it and hear what you did and how you thought and what changes can be wrought. It's simply fantastic. And I will say this one more time. You know, you have really lived such a rich and full life that most of us would envy. And you're not done yet. So, in closing, any other messages that you might have for the men and women who are listening here on how they should go about building an Equiverse? How important is that?
I think each one of us has the ability to become a catalyst for social change. Each one, at whatever level, each one of us has that ability. What we need is a push, so that we get into that belief in ourselves that we are here and we have to be responsible for one more person apart from the immediate family. If you can do that, that becomes the starting point. And that is what I feel people of privilege, people of entitlement in any civilized society, it is the entitled who lend their hand to the less privileged. I remember मेरे अब्बा का एक गीत था जिसमें उन्होंने कहा था, किसी का ना हो जिस पे साया, मुझे ऐसा दिन ऐसी रात तो, मैं मंजिल तो खुद ढूंढ लूंगी, मेरे हाथों में अपना हाथ दो, कदम दो कदम तुम मेरा साथ दो. तो मैं समझती हूँ कि बस वो हाथ दो और कदम दो कदम किसी और का साथ.
Such beautiful advice and such a lovely couplet to end the interview with. Thank you, really, ever so much. I really enjoyed.
Thank you. Shukriya.
Shukriya.
I want to come in and thank both of you so much for this lovely session. How inspirational it is for our participants. I can't even begin to tell you. As I was listening to you, Shabana ji, I was getting goosebumps. And this is what we've been trying to inculcate in the women who aspire to become leaders. And to hear from you, I think it will go directly into their hearts and hearts of many women who are listening to you today. And thank you, Saurav, so much for this really interesting conversation. And you brought out so many really relevant points that I think each of us can imbibe and work on. So thank you again, Shabana ji, and thank you, Saurav, so much for this.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
What an inspiring session. Thank you so much, Ms. Shabana Azmi and Mr. Saurabh Srivastava, for launching our conference with such an inspiring story. We are indeed very honored and enriched by this conversation, and I'm sure all the participants will go back with a few things they can do differently. And thanks again to you, Ipsita, for welcoming them. Thank you all, and let's tune in for our first session, Creating Equity in the Workspace. Together, we prosper. Before we jump in, we have a poll for you. Please click on the poll icon next to the chat visible on your screen. Nikita will be with you soon.
Perspective. You can't buy it. You can't simply stake a claim to it. Perspective is earned. It takes commitment and time to appreciate the place you've come from and understand where you're going. Think of last year, or maybe 10 years ago. Now we're talking. Go back 20 years, 30, 40, 50. 50 years will give you some serious perspective. At Hilti, 50 years ago, we were launching innovation with the release of the TE17, the first Hilti rotary hammer based on the new electro-pneumatic hammering mechanism that transformed concrete drilling with incomparable speed, comfort, and reliability, making the TE17 a legend on the job site. 50 years invested in research and development. For 50 years, we haven't backed down, not for a moment. We continue to innovate and revolutionize cordless rotary hammers, like the TE6A, the best we've ever made. We're even more committed to support you with our latest technology, and not just our rotaries, combis, and breakers, but also our inserts, as well as valuable services to help you get your job done easier. None of this would be possible without the input of our valued customers across the globe. With tens of thousands of holes tested before launching every product, 50 years of perspective has kept us creating, sustaining, and growing to make sure your job site is always more efficient and more productive. Hilti, as unique today as 50 years ago.